Guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the first video that I've made in 9 months. I'm so sorry that I haven't posted on here in a bit, but I do have more videos in the works. Stay tuned until the end of the video if you want to hear about that. But today we are going to talk about all the books that I read in September and October. We have 20 books to talk about, so let's just get right into it. So let's go ahead and start with the books that I finished in September. The first book that I finished was So Happy Together by Olivia Worley. I actually read this book in 2 sittings. I started it in August and read a decent chunk of it, and then went into September where I read the rest of it. This book is a mystery thriller about a woman named Jane who dates this guy Colin for a little bit, but then he breaks it off. She soon finds out after that that he has a new girlfriend, and the book follows Jane as she kind of weasels her way into their life. And over the course of that, she discovers secrets about Colin, and because she wants him so badly, she'll do almost anything to get him back despite these secrets. I thought this book was all right, and there were times when I was really interested in what was going on, but at the same time, there were a few things that I found a little annoying. One of these things being from the summary given on the flap of the book, you might think that the story is going one way, but it really doesn't. I'm going to say something slightly spoilery, so I'll put a timestamp here that you can skip to if you don't want to hear that. So pretty much I feel like the summary of the book we're given makes it seem like Jane is kind of this stalker psycho ex-girlfriend, which she kind of is in that she has a lot of thoughts that lend to that idea. But honestly, she actually ends up befriending Colin's new girlfriend. And while Jane does have obsessive thoughts about Colin, it's not like she's stalking this couple from afar. She very much so is a part of their world because she was invited in by the new girlfriend. Now, I will say though, there were definitely parts of the book that I remember thinking, oh wow, this is kind of juicy. I really want to find out what happens. Obviously, since I read a big chunk of the book in one day, I am going to talk about the ending now, but I'm not going to give away any spoilers. But the ending is a reason why I kind of ended up not enjoying it as a whole. All I'll say is I feel like it ended a way a lot of books that I've read recently do, and I was kind of looking for something a little bit more unique. I think there was one final twist after all is said and done at the end, but now I can't really remember what it is now, and that should really tell you all you need to know. The next two books are a part of a series, so I'm not going to give away too much about the plots themselves, and I will say I haven't talked about these series so far on this channel too much. So again, I'll be talking more about the series as a whole. So we have The Queen of Poisons by Robert Thorogood. This book is the third in the Marlowe Murder Club series. I did read the other two books in these series last year and earlier this year, and I really enjoyed them. So in this book, Judith, Bex, and Susie solve a standalone murder mystery. This time they are trying to solve the murder of the mayor of Marlowe, who was poisoned in a town meeting of some sort. Everyone at the meeting seems to have kind of a bone to pick with the mayor, as do other people who weren't there. So there are many possibilities as far as who could have murdered him. I listened to this book as an audiobook and I thought it was really fun. The narrator is great and definitely adds to the listening experience as a whole. I think one thing I like about this series is the whodunit aspect, or should I say the person who committed the murder. It's been a lot more creative than what I've seen, than what I've been reading with mysteries these days, and this one is no exception, so that's definitely a win. I love the relationships between the main characters in the book, Judith, Bex, and Susie. One thing that I also love about this series in general is that it's told from the third person omniscient point of view and a linear timeline, which I feel like is something we don't get a lot of. That is not in a lot of books that I've been reading lately, so I really appreciated that. Next, we have The Stranger in the Library by Eva Gates. This book is the 11th book in the Lighthouse Library Cozy Mystery series. I actually talk about this series in a little bit in a vlog that I filmed in January earlier this year that hasn't come out yet and won't go up more than likely until after this video has. So once that video is up, I'll link it for you guys up above and down below if you want to watch that. But the series itself takes place in the Outer Banks, and in the world of the book, the Bodhi Island Lighthouse, which is an actual lighthouse in the Outer Banks, actually has a library in it. And our main character in the series, Lucy, works at this library. In this book in particular, she's trying to solve the murder of an important person in the art world who was murdered at an art showing that the library was putting on. I absolutely love this series. I've been listening to the audiobooks for over a year now, and they're just a lot of fun. This is a series that I think I'm enjoying the audiobooks more than I would if I were reading the physical book. I don't know if you guys are the same way, but there are books that I find I enjoy more than when I listen to, and others I feel like I would need to read the physical books for. And this is just a series that I like to listen to on audio. As far as this book in the series, I wouldn't necessarily say it stuck out to me because of the actual mystery itself, but I really love the characters in the series and their interactions with each other. I think that's what really does it for me. I just feel like I would want to be in this town and interact with these people and go to the places that they go to. There's a very adorable library cat named Charles who is pretty much a character in himself, and I absolutely love him. As far as the book itself, I don't remember exactly who the killer was as of right now, but if I ever want to revisit this particular book, that will probably be a good thing. But I did enjoy the whole atmosphere of the characters in this book delving into the art world. I enjoyed the scenes where they were at art shows and the whole atmosphere that added. That was definitely something different from this series. The next book I have in the series actually just came out, and I'm on hold for the audiobook at my library as we speak, so I should be seeing that very soon. So now we're going back to the standalone books, and the next one I have is Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister. And the first thing that I need to say about this book is when looking back at my list to think about what it was I read in September, I had to really strain my mind to think about what this book was actually about. So that probably says pretty much everything right there, but I will go ahead and talk about what the book is about a little bit more. In this book, a 22-year-old woman named Olivia goes missing, and Julia, who is a detective, is trying to figure out what happened to her. But because of something in Julia's past, she ends up being blackmailed and has to frame someone else for this disappearance. And there's also a tie-in with another missing woman's case from before the story even begins. I will say that there was a twist in this book that I didn't see coming up until shortly before it was revealed, so that was nice. I always love a twist that I didn't see coming. I didn't necessarily not like this book for any reason, but it just wasn't something that particularly stood out. I did read Wrong Place, Wrong Time by this author. In fact, it was the first audiobook that I listened to, and I remember not really liking that book that much. I also listened to this book on audiobook, and I did like it better, but unfortunately, in the grand scheme of things, I think this book is going to be just another mystery thriller. Next up, we have This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. Now, I read this book in one day, and I do have some feelings about it. I want to say first that what I'm going to say is my opinion, and I'm not trying to insult anyone who liked this book or anything like that. So in this book, we have another protagonist named Jane, which I am just realizing as I'm making this video. But in this book, Jane joins a group of online true crime sleuths after the unexpected death of her father. This online sleuthing was just meant to be a distraction from the grief she was feeling, but ends up becoming an obsession, and the four fellow online sleuths that she meets end up becoming like a second family to her. So I'll start with the good things. I feel like in a lot of books, we don't get into the nitty-gritty of grief, and therefore we don't really connect with the character on the grief they're feeling for the person they love, but in this book, we really do get that, and I truly do feel like the author did a fantastic job of making me sympathize with Jane and understand how she was feeling. And I feel like I knew something about the father that she lost. So the first part of the book, we kind of see how Jane and these sleuths take on the case of someone that was murdered in the town local to where Jane is and how they end up approaching that case. And let me tell you, I was so invested and entertained in this part of the book. It had my attention right from the beginning, and I was fully prepared to stay up late reading it because I enjoyed it so much. This case was not the main part of the story, though, and I think it was just used to set the scene for how Jane got involved with this group of sleuths and to establish the relationship between them all, which I'm not complaining about because, again, I thought it was really well done. The part where the book lost me was when it started talking about the main case, which I feel pretty much was a copy-paste version of the real-life case of the Idaho murders. The Idaho murders was a case where 4 college students, 3 girls, and 1 guy were brutally murdered in their off-campus apartment in Idaho. I'm not going to go too much into detail about that because that's not what this video or channel is about, but I am someone who really is into true crime, and I followed this case really closely, so I know not that everyone who reads this book is going to know the case as well as I did, but as someone who did follow the case closely, I was a little offended by how closely the details from the case were put into this book. A big reason for that is because of the comments that were made about the victims in the book by the other characters. Now, I know the characters in the book are obviously just that, characters in the book, but since the details of the case that Jane and company are trying to solve in the book are pretty much exactly the same details of the real life case, it was difficult not to associate the characters in the book with the people involved in the real life case. Not only does the case in the book take place in Idaho, but the author even uses a name that's super close to one of the actual victims, and they both go by the same nickname. I also feel like the author was trying to knock me over the head with certain messaging, and that just added to what I think was in very poor taste as well. If the author had something that she wanted to say, like commentary on the true crime community and what cases do and don't get attention, that's fine. But I think she should have made up her own case. I think even if she contained like certain things that were a little reminiscent of the real life case, that might have even been okay if it was done sparingly here and there. But honestly, I thought it was exploitive and very disrespectful, if I'm being completely honest. And I really wish the main case in the book was not, again, based so closely off something that happened in real life. Again, no hate to you if you enjoyed the book. I just wasn't able to look past that stuff. There was also a typo in the ebook. If I can find the screenshot that I took of it, I will post it here, but I could do a whole separate video on this subject. Maybe I will at some point, but I feel like these days it's almost impossible to not find a typo or grammatical error of some type in books I'm reading, and that's very disappointing, and it just takes away from the reading experience for me. Like, are these books even being proofread at all? So yeah, the first half of the book was good, but after that, it was completely ruined for me. So the next book that I'm going to talk about is part of a series, but it's the first book in a series, and it's called Survival of the Fritters. It's the first in a cozy mystery series by Ginger Bolton. This book takes place primarily in a donut shop, which I love the premise of, even though donuts are not necessarily my favorite dessert. But in this book, Emily, who owns a donut shop, grows concerned when an elderly customer of hers, Georgia, doesn't show up one morning at the donut shop. Emily and a bunch of Georgia's friends who frequent the donut shop find Georgia murdered in her home, and the book goes on from there. I will say one thing I appreciated about this book a lot was the narrator, Emily, reflecting on how much she missed Georgia, even though we as readers knew nothing about Georgia because she was never alive during the time which this book takes place. I feel like a lot of times it isn't reflected on, and we don't get acknowledgement of the character that was murdered in that way, so I really did appreciate that. And in the book, Emily befriends one of Georgia's friends named Lois, and I absolutely loved their interactions, and I loved reading about those two together and how their relationship grew. Oh, and there's also a little cat mascot in the book named Deputy Donut, and I absolutely love that. That's actually the name of the series, the Deputy Donut series, which is absolutely adorable. There were moments in the book that I laughed out loud during. I was listening to the audiobook, and I 100% am going to continue with the audiobooks in this series, but I want to finish the Lighthouse Library series first. Okay, so now moving on to the books that I read in October. So first up, we have The Block Party by Jamie Day, which is another mystery. At the very beginning of this book, a murder happens during an annual summer block party, and we go back in time to figure out what it was that happened and who exactly was murdered and why. We get two perspectives in this book. We have Alex and her daughter Letty. This book also didn't have anything that totally stuck out to me or would make me remember it, say, a year from now, but I didn't necessarily not like it or anything like that. There are elements of a block party, but it's not the focal point. Like, obviously, the murder happens at the block party, but it's pretty much, I feel like, just mentioned then and towards the end of the book. It was just something that I listened to at work. I wasn't 100% hooked and totally invested necessarily. One thing that kind of annoyed me, though, was at some point in the book, we have a character who supposedly did something really bad, but we're never told what that bad thing was, I don't think, so that was kind of annoying. And then, yet again, the ending and reasons behind what happened was something very predictable because it's been done in a lot of the books I've read recently. Coming up next, we have The Maid's Secret by Nita Prose, which is the third, technically fourth, and final book in the Molly the Maid series. There was a little novella between the first two books and this one, but I've talked about the previous two Maid books in a video before on this channel. I'll link those videos below for you if you want to check those out, but I thought the first book was just okay, and I really, really loved the second book. Those two books I read physically. I actually own the first book, and the third book, the little novella, I listened to as an audiobook, and this book, The Maid's Secret, I listened to on audio as well. So in this book, we are continuing Molly's story as she works in a high-end hotel as a maid. And in this book, she isn't trying to solve a murder necessarily. She's trying to figure out the story behind an item that belonged to her grandmother because it was stolen. So a lot of the story is told through her grandma's diary entries. I don't really have too much to say about this book. I, again, thought it was fine for what it was, but didn't necessarily have as much fun with it as I did the second book. And I did think there were some heartwarming moments and funny quips throughout, but I pretty much wanted to listen to this book to see how it was because at this point I had already read the previous three books. I did not realize that this was going to be the last book though, and I think it's good that it ended here because at this point I think there was really nothing else to be told as far as the story. I don't think this even was supposed to be in a series in the first place. I feel like I read somewhere that it was only after the success of the first book that the other books were commissioned or whatever, which I know happens sometimes, but yeah, we'll just leave it there. So unfortunately, we do have the first DNF for this list, and I know some people might have a different opinion than me, and that's fine, but this DNF is My Friends by Fredrik Backman. I will say this is my first book by this author, and I picked it up because I thought the premise sounded really interesting, which was a teenage girl sets out to find the story behind a famous painting of three friends sitting on a pier. I borrowed this ebook from my library, so that's how I read this book. This book is told in present day, but we also switch back from a summer 20-ish years ago when the boys who were in the painting were younger and the summer that the event in the painting took place. I will be the first to say that I really did find a lot of quotes in this book that I really liked and could relate to. I thought some of the dialogue was pretty witty as well. At the same time though, I definitely felt the story dragging at times, and sometimes I felt like it was trying too hard to be deep and poetic. At least that's the vibe that I got from it. And then there are moments that are super silly, like farting seems to be a reoccurring thing in this book. I don't know. Just the juxtaposition there, I don't think really work. It seems like every single person in the story, save for one or two, is super poetic and deep, and after a while it just gets to be too much. One of the main characters in the story, the teenager named Louisa, I think is like 18, but she reads like an 8-year-old. One minute she's spitting out these poetic, deepish thoughts and quotes, and then other times she's acting and saying things that again read more like a child to me. And I know that there are many aspects of people and their personalities. You can be two things at the same time, but in this case, it really wasn't believable and just didn't work for me. This isn't a spoiler, but Louisa meets some of these people who are in the painting and talks to them, and one of them says she's one of us, and that seems to be a reoccurring thing, but I feel like we're not exactly shown that as much as we're told that. After a while, I was just getting really bored and I found myself dreading picking up the book. I was skipping pages and it was due soon at the library anyway, and on my Libby app, I could see that there were people waiting, so I just decided not to finish it and return it early. I'm not opposed to picking up another book by this author in the future though. I do think he's a good writer, and Beartown still is on my TBR. This book in particular just didn't work for me. Also, again, there was a typo in this ebook, which I know is picky, and it's petty for me to point this out, but yet another example of what I was talking about earlier, and I just think it needs to be called out. Next, we have The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I know this series is really popular, but it was on my TBR before I realized how popular it was. I just thought it was another mystery thriller for some reason. I don't know why. That was probably my misunderstanding. Like when I read the synopsis, I probably read it really quick or something, but it's kind of more so just like a regular thriller, so I'll preface by saying that that was my mistake going on again. It's about a woman named Millie who starts as a nanny at the house of this wealthy couple. It seems like Millie can't do anything right in the eyes of the wife at first, but she starts to get to know the husband, and then the book takes a turn about halfway through or so. I'm not going to say that I didn't like this book or anything. It definitely made for some compulsive listening, but I didn't really think it had anything creative or anything like that going on either. This book fell into the theme of what I was alluding to earlier. Again, I'm not going to say because it's spoilery, but yeah. It is what it is. I do plan on seeing the movie when it comes out, but as of right now, I don't think I'm going to be continuing with the book series. Next, we have another DNF, unfortunately, which was Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yumbao. First off, the cover on this book is absolutely gorgeous. Definitely have to acknowledge that. And apparently with the physical book, you can actually take the dust jacket, I guess, and there are instructions on how to fold it up into a boat or something, which sounds really cool. I don't think I would do that if I had the physical book anyway, but I couldn't even if I wanted to because I got the ebook from my library. But anyway, so this book is about a woman named Hannah who runs a pawn shop of sorts with her dad, but instead of pawning off objects, the people who walk in pawn off their regrets. Then on the eve when Hannah is supposed to take over this shop in her father's place, her father goes missing, and together with a man named Keishan who walked in the shop that morning, they try to figure out what happened to her father by traveling through this magical world. I really wanted to like this book because I very much so liked the atmosphere of the book, and I could picture the world in which it was taking place in so well. There's a very interesting scene where Hannah and Keishan are walking through this world, and it's pretty much like a world taking place in a scroll. When they looked at each other, instead of seeing each other as the people they were, they see each other as people drawn in ink, and I could picture that so perfectly. It just seemed so beautiful, but the story itself I couldn't get into. This was another book that was due relatively soon back at my library, and so I had to read a certain amount of pages daily, and I just wasn't looking forward to it. I had no desire to read ahead. Nothing like that. I went ahead and looked up spoilers, and there was a twist that I didn't think I would have seen coming, so that might have been cool to read, but I don't know. I just didn't care to go on, really. I think if I did want to give this book another chance in the future, I would need to listen to the audiobook. Maybe then I wouldn't have DNF'd it, but I don't know for sure. Okay, next up we have the first book in another cozy mystery series called The Body in the Bookshelf by Ellie Alexander. This is the first book in the Secret Bookcase mystery series. In this book, there was a book event going on, kind of like a citywide book festival where all the stores participate in doing things like scavenger hunts and selling book themes, food and drinks and stuff like that. I really enjoyed listening to the inner workings of putting that together. But while this was going on, Annie, who works at a bookstore that has a secret bookcase in it, discovers a body in the room behind the secret bookcase. And the book was about solving that mystery. I listened to this audiobook in one day and my mind was kind of elsewhere and I was working while I was listening to it, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the mystery and I really liked the owner of the bookstore, and I do think I would be interested in continuing with this series at some point, possibly. I've got a few cozy mystery series going on right now, so I just want to focus on the ones that I'm focusing on. The next book I finished was The Narrow by Kate Alice Marshall. I did listen to this book on audiobook. I started it in June or July and didn't end up finishing it until October. This book is about a girl named Eden who attends a boarding school, and outside of this boarding school there's a river known as the Narrow that apparently no one has survived once falling into it, but as it happens, Eden meets a student named Delphine who has apparently survived this river after falling in. While it did take me a while to finish this audiobook, I think I would say that I enjoyed it for the most part. I enjoyed the relationship between Eden and Delphine, but I didn't necessarily think that the ending was anything that stood out to me because I'm already struggling to remember it and whether or not I was satisfied with it. However, I do think this is something as of right now I would be open to listening to again at some point. Also, we just have to acknowledge how gorgeous this cover is. I should note that I did read What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall, which I do think I ended up enjoying for the most part, but I did DNF A Killing Cold earlier this year, but I would be willing to pick it up again at some point, maybe as an audiobook, because I definitely wasn't feeling the ebook. Next, we have a DNF that I DNF'd within the first 10 minutes, maybe less, of listening to, and that was The Unseen by Gigi Griffiths. It popped up on my recommended in Libby, and I really like the premise of it. I had just gotten done listening to The Narrow at that point, and The Unseen summary was written up describing the book as a queer paranormal romance, which I was really in the mood for after reading The Narrow, but I just didn't like the way The Unseen was being told and it kind of turned me off, and I just didn't feel like dealing with it. So I DNF'd it pretty quickly. That's what you gotta do when you've got a lot of stuff on your TBR, especially if like what you're reading or listening to wasn't on your actual TBR and it just popped up. The next audiobook I listened to was Unplugged by Gordon Corman, and I'm not going to lie, this was a complete cover read because I loved the cover and the premise sounded interesting. This is a middle grade book and it takes place in a wellness camp and is told from the perspective of several different kids at the camp, one of which is Jet, who is the son of a billionaire and isn't quite happy with being at the camp because, as the name of the book suggests, the camp is completely unplugged. So there are no cell phones, no laptops, anything like that. But eventually he finds a cute baby lizard, which they end up naming Needles, and he and the other kids at the camp start taking care of Needles. But after a while, they find themselves trying to figure out what's going on at the camp because something about it in the town surrounding just doesn't seem right. I think this book was really cute. I don't know if it's because I listened to the audiobook though, but to me, I feel like the actual plot didn't pick up until closer to the end of the book. It's not a very long book though, and I did finish the audiobook in one day, and I definitely would listen to it again. Next, we have One of the Girls by Lucy Clark, which is another mystery thriller, and it's taking place over the course of a weekend for a bachelorette party. It's one of those books where you're trying to figure out who it was who was murdered for most of the book, as well as why. There are, I think, 6 different perspectives in this book, and each of them are for people who are in the wedding party plus the bride. Again, this is another mystery thriller where nothing really stuck out to me. I was entertained by the audiobook at times, and there were times when I wasn't entertained as well. It was interesting hearing about the dynamics between the people within the group of friends, though. For some reason, I love reading about friendships that end up on the rocks or heading in that general direction for some reason. And I love the dynamics of groups of friends in general who maybe haven't seen each other in a long time. So there's definitely that aspect of the book that I liked, but that's about it. And again, to avoid spoilers, this book does have that vague ending that I've been alluding to this whole time. So it was very lackluster for me because I saw it coming from a mile away. Next, we have Chaos at the Lazy Bones Bookshop by Emmeline Duncan. Now, I've been wanting to read this book for over a year. There was a 3-month wait last year when it came out, and when it finally came off hold, I had some stuff going on, so I never read it and didn't think about reading it again until October, closer to Halloween this year. So here we are now. So similar to The Body in the Bookshop, this book is taking place during a book event going on in the town, and our main protagonist owns a bookshop. She actually owns the bookshop in this book. She doesn't just work at one like in The Body in the Bookshop. But the town that takes place in this book is Halloween themed all year round because of some famous horror movie that was shot there years ago, I believe. I don't know if it's because I had just gotten done reading the very similar themed book so soon before or what it was, but the idea just didn't seem as unique to me at that point. It's no fault of the book though, obviously. The person who ends up getting married in this book is the host of a famous ghost hunting show, and there are aspects of that even after he was murdered that are shown in the book, like how it's filmed and everything like that. So I did enjoy listening to that in this book. I thought it was a lot of fun. I did not care for our main protagonist Bailey, though, in Chaos in the Lazy Bones Bookshop. I thought she was kind of rude. I'm not going to give a spoiler, but she treats someone near the end of the book kind of badly, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to continue with this series, though. The next book I finished was The Killer Question by Janice Hallett. For those of you who don't know, Janice Hallett is my auto-buy author. So as soon as I found out this book was a thing, I went ahead and bought it. This book is an epistolary novel, so it's told in a series of WhatsApp messages, emails, and other formats. In this book, a man named Dominic is emailing someone who works for Netflix and is proposing the making of a documentary about his aunt and uncle named Sue and Mal. And Dominic is pretty much promising that it will be an amazing true crime journey that the viewers of Netflix will just love. So we go back and forth between present day emails and 2 timelines in the past. The first timeline is of Sue and Mal when they were owners of a pub that hosted a weekly trivia game. And the second timeline is what their life was like before that. The main plotline, though, focuses around the trivia game that Mal and Sue host at their bar. One day, the regular trivia goers are disrupted by a new team who wins every single game, but then a body shows up, and so not only is the talk of the town this new group of mysterious trivia goers, but the talk of the town is now also obviously who committed the murder. I had a lot of fun with this book. It's got Janice Hallett's trademark humor that I loved, and while I won't say it's my favorite book by her, I did enjoy it a lot more than some of the more recent books that I've read by her. I think I'm going to do a video where I rank all of Janice Hallett's books, so stay tuned for that, but I'm also working on a vlog where I vlog my whole experience reading this book and another Janice Hallett book that I just got, which is a middle grade book called Box Full of Murders. So stay tuned for that. I'll link both of those videos once they're up. But yeah, going back to the killer question, I do think that the ending could have been shortened a little bit, but other than that, I overall really enjoyed this book. The next book we have is Braised Pork by An Yu. I listened to the audiobook and I started it one day and finished it the next, and it was relatively short. This book is about a woman named Jaja who finds her husband dead, and with his body, she finds this serious drawing of this half man, half fish like creature. And she sets off to find out what the meaning of the drawing is and why her late husband has it. I kind of feel like not a lot happened in this book, and the parts of the story that were the most interesting, I feel didn't really lead anywhere. I don't know if it's because I was listening to the audiobook or what, but I had somewhat of a difficult time understanding what was going on towards the end and what the solution of it all meant. Maybe I would have understood it more if I had read it with my eyeballs, but then again, I don't know if I would have finished this book if I would have read it with my eyeballs. However, this is a book that I might want to revisit in the future to see if my opinion changes because I don't 100% feel comfortable saying that I didn't like this book necessarily, if that makes sense. Because I was walking a lot when I was listening to this audiobook, and I actually did enjoy my experience with it as far as how it went with when I was walking. So, yeah, maybe I'll revisit it a few years down the line. I think I just had different expectations of what this book was going to be, which is no fault of the book, obviously. That's just a me thing. So maybe when I'm in a different type of mood, I'll listen to it again. Okay, last but not least, we have The Woman in the Wallpaper by Laura Jones. This is a historical fiction book, which I don't think I've read a historical fiction since 2022. It's not a genre that I delve into a lot, but I saw another YouTuber talking about this book and I was really intrigued. So I got the audiobook of it when I saw that it was available on Libby. This book takes place in France during the French Revolution, and it's told from three different perspectives. We have two sisters named Lara and Sophie, and then we have Hortense. So Laura and Sophie start working at this wallpaper factory with their mom after they lose their father in an accident. So while they're working at this factory, Lara starts to get freaked out because there's wallpaper in this one room in the factory in particular that depicts the owner of the factory's late wife. And Lara starts to see parallels of her own life with the late wife depicted in the wallpaper. Sophie, on the other hand, starts to get really involved with the impending French Revolution, so that's a big part of her story in the book. And then there's Hortense, who starts living in the factory too. I'm not going to say what her connection is because I don't want to give anything away. Actually, if you looked up who she was, it probably tells you at the back of the book, but I didn't read the back of the book. I really honestly enjoyed this book though. I thought it was interesting. There were several twists and happenings that I did not see coming from a mile away, so that was pretty great. Even though I wouldn't say this is a mystery thriller or anything like that, but it was an aspect of the story that I thought kept it entertaining. My favorite character in this book was definitely Hortense for sure. I loved her chapters and I thought she was hilarious and just the things she thought and the things that she said had me laughing out loud so many times. She has this little dog and that's her best friend and she pretty much treats him like a human, which I'll never blame her for because our pets are our best friends, but there's this one scene where she does something really funny and hilarious with her dog in front of a whole bunch of people, and it's just amazing. I rewound that scene a few times when listening to the audiobook, and if this book was ever adapted into a movie, that scene would be so amazing, and I really enjoyed that. She is very much a flawed character, though. She does think she's above everyone else and looks down on people who aren't as wealthy as she is. So obviously, I didn't like that aspect of her character because obviously it isn't cool the way she looks down on others, but she's a complex character. I'll put it that way. If you like historical fictions, I would definitely recommend this book. Those are all the books that I read in September and October. We have 17 total that I finished and 3 DNFs, which isn't bad. Obviously, I like to not DNF any books. It is what it is. And I apologize for not posting in a while, but as I mentioned, I do have a vlog in the works. It's the vlog that I mentioned where I will be reading the two Janice Halleck's books. And I'm also going to be doing what I'm calling a backlog vlog series where I post some vlogs that I've been working on from a while back. One is from September going into October of last year. So yes, literally over a year ago now. And the other one is from January of this year. It'll be my first vlog that I'll be posting on this channel, which I'm really excited about. That one from January is almost done. Actually, it's pretty much all edited clip-wise, but I just got to go through and put some finishing touches on it, like adding the pictures of the books and stuff like that. And as I mentioned, I will possibly be doing a video or maybe even a short of me ranking all of the Janice Halleck's books. So stay tuned for that. Once again, I'll link all of those videos once they're done. But yeah, let me know down below how your reading for September and October went. Let me know if you read any of these books and what you think about them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you have a great day. Bye.